Hello there everyone! It has felt like forever since I last did a video on Battlefleet Gothic Armada 1, and with Armada 2's pre-order beta now underway, I am itching to show everyone what all has changed exactly, for there have been some changes, some of which we already know, some of which we've already seen. As no doubt, there's plenty other streams going on as well there already as the pre-order beta is underway. So let's have a quick look at the basics and of course what's changed with the current 6 factions that were in Armada 1. Alright, first up, as you would probably already notice, we are getting ourselves some brand new introductions to help complement the larger size fleet we're going to be fielding into these battles. And how big a fleet are you asking? Well, Tyndalos has said that it was going to be around 1200 points, and that's what we got there exactly. 1200 points to play with, although all the fleets have been readjusted on their points a little bit, so it's not truly like double your fleet size in comparison to the traditional like Armada 1 600 point battles, but I say it's safe to say it's really damn close to that regard at least. And even how you start off is going to be exactly as you remember it. You're going to spread out your fleet according to the terrain and the objective, and in the case of Armada 2, the objective's always going to be the same. You're going to have like a certain amount of points to accumulate throughout the course of the battle. I believe it's also unlimited not turn timers, but unlimited timers. So you're not going to be running out, or at least having games decided by the clock there. Every one of these battles is going to have 5 objectives that you and your opponents are going to be contesting for there. You're going to be flying your ships onto them, capture them, hold them for about 10 seconds roughly, and then you will start accumulating points towards your ultimate victory. The objectives are scattered throughout the maps somewhat randomly. There's probably a pattern to them there, but the idea is to spread out your fleets, capture as many of the points as you safely can, and then once you get to the middle of the map to contest the ones that are there, you will be fighting a slugfest battle with your adversary, depending on what kind of faction and races and armaments you have available to you. And as I'm sure you already know, capturing the points alone are not the only way to win your match, or without a doubt, destroying your adversary entirely will also give you a victory, but you will also accumulate points based on the ship's actual cost there that contributes towards your victory condition. So you can, in theory, destroy the majority of their faction, and even though you've been behind on capture points all that entire time, you can still get a nice victory at the end just by benefiting off their points. In this case, since your max fleet size is 1200 points, you are going to get at most 1200 points towards your victory. So it is going to be slightly under half of your required victory points there, unless you destroy their entire fleet. Then it'll be an immediate victory. The UI has also been changed there quite drastically from Armada 1, with all your abilities divided into categories down below here. Your boardings are kind of separated from your weapons, your orders, which is brand new to Armada 2, at least the list of abilities you have access to, and your stances, which used to be the Armada 1's version of your orders, your lock on, your brace for impact. They are now permanent buffs you can give to your fleet there. They do incur a 2-minute cooldown, so you need to be very certain of what order or stance you want to take when you're coming to a battle, but they will heavily augment your fleet and give you major bonuses as a result. How your ships also move there has been adjusted just a tiny bit there, for almost all the battleships in the game have completely lost their high energy turn functionality there. There are a few exceptions, most notably of course is like the Eldar Void Stalkers, since that is kind of key to their abilities, and even some other battleships I believe still retain it to an effective extent. But even then, your all-ahead fold now triples your movement speed, but it also doubles the amount of maneuver gauge that's being utilized, or combustion points as is referred to in game itself. So all your movements are a lot more drastic, even with your normal speed boost, for cases like when trying to avoid bombers, most notably of course like torpedoes and like stasis bombs and other effects on the ground. Even how the armor functions in Armada 2 has been changed drastically there. From before, it was a flat percentage to completely ignore damage based on the ships and the angle you're being attacked from. In this case, it's a flat damage reduction now. All attacks are going to do damage of some kind there. It's going to be heavily mitigated instead by the armor as opposed to relying on the RNG, especially in like cases like Orc's Mega Cannon and other weaponry that don't have the convenience of piercing through armors to get that reliable hits in. Instead, you're just going to be able to weather it a lot better as opposed to just getting unlucky shots, as it were. And also, even their armor value has been changed drastically, it looks like here. For instead of the traditional 50, 25, 75 type armor, it looks like they went with like a literal sense of how it is on a dice there. So when you see 83 armor on like the prow of a Retribution or any other Imperial Navy vessel, that basically means you're only taking 1/6 of the damage there. Whereas in Eldar, they're going to have a lot lower value. In the tabletop version, they had like a 50-50 chance to block damage. It is also the same way here in Armada 2. They've been buffed up to have 50 armor in this case. Now, one of the big changes they did to Armada 2 as far as like your activatable abilities, at least the majority of your activatable abilities, like your torpedoes, your bombers, and the Nova Cannon, they now have charges on them. Even the boarding itself there has charges, but all these abilities, you're going to be limited in the amount of uses they have there. So you need to pick and choose when you can activate them or when to maximize their potential, but it's going to cut down on a lot of the spamming that's been going on. The endless spamming of torpedoes for long-range harassment, and some notable mentions of like bombers like harassment and not really committing to engagements with at least like mobile fleets. Most notably Eldar and possibly the Tau with their aircast favor. So you will need to pick the perfect opportunity to maximize the damage, and boy do they ever hit hard. The damage has been ramped up with the fact that all the ships have basically been doubled in their health there, while your macro weaponries and everything else still kept their original damage. The torpedoes themselves and the bombers have been cranked up to kind of account for this additional health bonus that's been included to everything. And speaking of boarding, let's talk about the boarding mechanic there. With since you have limited charges on both your Lightning Strike and boarding actions separately, you're going to have good use of both these abilities. And what they straight up do, with the new troop mechanic that's in Armada 2, you just straight up do flat troop damage to each of the individual ships there. And after certain thresholds, they get penalties to their weapon stats, as well as like a chance to do critical hits on them, as you already know. But the main purpose of doing the boarding is to try and eventually kill off the crew, as well as do damage to morale for the sheer amount of damage and boarding that you do on them. And morale itself is a third health bar, or at least a third bar that appears on each of these ships here. Once it drops down completely, your ship is going to try to evade the combat. And what that means, your ship is going to attempt to fly off to the closest corner of the map and where it will try to disengage. You can try and do a mutiny as normal to cancel it, but you will suffer heavy troop casualties as a result, unless you use some of these new abilities that are included in your orders tab there, which for most of the factions you'll have access to Call to Arms, which is used to kind of negate boarding attempts, but your flagship, the ship that will be leading your fleet into battle, will also have access to a rally ability, which is an AoE order that immediately cancels out any mutinies in range of the flagship and restores a handful of morale to the rest of your ships that are in range. And if you ever find yourself in a bad situation with one of your fleets, warping them out, at least any that are about to get destroyed, will deny your opponent a handful of points. For if you successfully warp out, you will only give the opponent half of its actual point value, but there is still a chance in a lost in warp-like effect that will give your opponent the full point value. So you still need to be careful if you are trying to use this as a means to keep ahead or trying to avoid falling behind like a tight battle. Now, scouting is very important here, for there's actually two different phases to the scouting. There's the traditional like sensor range that identifies ships when they get into range, but for when they are silent run or hidden entirely, you will need like a scanning range or get the ship into scanning range in order to be able to detect them, which is what the inner blue line is supposed to represent. This does not change for ships that have increased sensor range like the Widowmaker, although there may be some unique vessels that have increased scanning range. Now, bombers and assault ships function exactly as you remember them, with the added caveat that you can now actually attempt to bomb and board ships that you don't have identified just yet there. This is a very risky endeavor, for if they ever silent run or get completely hidden, it means that your bombers no longer have a target lock on them. It will waste the charge of your bomber or said assault boat. But what you can do also, as a brand new feature to Armada 2, is that your interceptors will actually be able to scout for you. They will be able to patrol or at least protect an allied vessel, or you could just use them to harass an enemy capital ship and actually shoot down their point defense. This can have a lot of potential in softening up isolated ships there, or at least soften up a target for potential torpedo and bomber attack runs later on in the battle. Do keep in mind, when I say you can scout with them, you can also tell them to go to specific points on the map there. It doesn't strictly need to be on a enemy ship. So you can have them scout out any point that you feel may be too dangerous or a little too uncertain or a little bit risky for one of your capital ships or frigates to actually go in there for you. Now, this is your fleet deployment screen there for skirmish and multiplayer. How it functionally works is pretty straightforward. You pick your faction, you pick a sub-faction, which basically gives you different colors and customizations, or at least cosmetics, visual appearances for each of your ships. And then, as per the new rules of Armada 2, you could choose 2 skills for your admiral ship, which is going to be leading your fleet, and 2 upgrades that all have like different categories, which ships they're applied to in the description of each one of them. So for example, emission dissipators, which you use to kind of prevent your ship from being revealed when you use your evasive maneuvering, that will only apply to escort ships and light cruisers now. Whereas short burn torpedoes, obviously, this is a pretty straightforward one, will only work on ships that have torpedo launchers. Now let's have a look at some of the changes and additions that were implemented with the original 6 factions of Armada 1, notably the Imperial Navy, Orcs, Chaos, Space Marines, Tau, and Eldar. And with the Imperial Navy, the Grand Cruisers have finally made their appearance. We have the Vengeance Avenger and the Exorcist all here with what was described in some of my previous videos of in preparation for Armada 2. The Avenger is kind of the close-range macro cannon ship. The Vengeance is kind of a hybrid, equivalent to like the Lunar. And the Exorcist is a pure like bomber carrier type ship with a couple of macro cannons to help support. And making their appearance finally for the battleships, we have the Apocalypse class battleship. This thing I'm really damn excited for. It has a Nova cannon on the front, 3 sets of prow lances on each side of the ship, and a couple of heavy macro turrets on top of it. It is as slow as an Emperor, which can be a bit problematic when it gets swarmed, so you may need to have good use of a micro warp jump or some other abilities to help keep it safe. And we have an Oberon battleship there, which is kind of more of a hybrid of an Emperor type battleship. It has the same kind of sensor range, it's got less bombers in exchange for a little bit of lance batteries on the side to help complement its weaponry. We also got the Endeavor, Endurance, and Defiance here, which are like the kind of more, more support type of ships, I guess. They have less armor. They have the same speed as the cruisers themselves, so they're going to be taken along with them more. They feel more like a utility type of light cruisers as opposed to like scouting and forward spotting. Now for Chaos, Chaos has gotten the exact same treatment with the Grand Cruisers, although I'll tell you right now, no other ship has access to a Grand Cruiser. For some reason, it's just the Imperial Navy and the Chaos fleets, and that's mainly because they had Grand Cruisers for the tabletop game there. Although since they have their own kind of subcategory, it does feel a little bit weird having this constant blank spot for all the other factions, I gotta say. But everything else is kind of, there is no other new additions to last for Chaos, so you're going to be playing with a lot of the same old. It's just a question on how they've been retweaked stat-wise as far as being more impactful. Hell, since range has been changed to be a little more longer reaching, they may have a lot more presence with their lance-based strategy. Since max range used to be 15,000 units in Armada 1, the max range now is 22,500, which is quite a significant margin, and especially with some of these ships, well, their speed has been tweaked a little bit as well. Some of them go slightly faster than normal, so it's not enough to account for the extra range of you're going to have with lances, especially with fighters now also spawning for you. Although beacons are going to still are not as going to be as prevalent due to the fact that only the Admiral ship is going to have access to an auger probe. Now, the Orcs no longer have their custom points available to them. They just got straight up pre-built type of ships like all the other factions, so you're going to have to pick and choose what you want. You're not going to get your dream vessel there unless there's already one in place that has exactly what you're looking for. But what they did include is a handful of rock type ships, which are function exactly like the Crew War Spears. They have 3 different variants available to them, and these primarily could be used to just like deny or at least hold a point, since they have like the full possible armor on all 3 sides of the ship there, and they have a good amount of health depending on the size of the rock you're taking. So you could pretty much use these to kind of draw out a lot of fire and force an opponent to maybe commit a little bit more than they would like to, trying to get a point. Now at Eldar, well, they haven't really had any changes at all there. Oddly enough, the Eclipse and Vol type of battle cruisers are now downgraded to the cruiser variant. And while they keep their 3 pulsar beams, it looks like, for some reason they're considered as a cruiser. They have the same hit points now. That's probably the main reason why, if I had to guess. They have more point defense, so I'm a little uncertain what's going on here, but the Void Stalker, when you consider the fact that the armor has been increased, when you compare it to Armada 1, the Void Stalker is ridiculously expensive at 506 points. They didn't get any new additions alas, which kind of goes more into the new Eldar factions if you want to consider new actual Eldar toys to play with. But as it stands now, Eldar as a whole probably became a lot more durable, but with the limited charges to their bombers and torpedoes, it remains to be seen if they can last long in a fight. They may potentially run out of steam depending on your strategy. Now the Space Marines, I was really excited at the potential of some kind of new original ship that Tyndallus will include. Nope, they did not do that there. While we had the Vanguard for Armada 1, this has a little bit of a place in maybe some of the Forge World lore, but we did not get anything that was based on the Primaris Marines or anything of the like, which kind of what I was secretly hoping for. But the Vanguard has been tweaked quite a bit there, as far as at least the one with the bombardment cannon. It now has a 270-degree arc for its bombardment cannon, so it is able to contribute in the strafing runs with your strike cruisers and battle barges, and at least until you're able to go in for the kill, whereas before the Mark III was kind of relegated to either diving in headlong to the enemy since it was restricted to only a 90-degree arc. And it remains to be seen exactly how these ships will perform. Considering the health of everything has been doubled, you think the Space Marines would do pretty good there on the durability front, since instead of 75 armor they now have 83. Although Brace for Impact just has a different modifier to reducing damage, it doesn't stack anymore from the looks of it, with like it was in Armada 1, so you're not going to get your guaranteed 100% armor permanently. I hate to break it to you. I think it's just a flat like 25% damage reduction as a separate modifier after the 83 has been applied, I think. Now, talking about the Tau fleet's going to be odd since they actually have 2 sub-factions here, but simply put, the Protector fleet hasn't really been changed at all, aside from the fact that they're missing their messenger for some weird reason. They no longer have the messenger to help complement them in the means of like shooting down torpedoes like they did in Armada 1. While the Tau merchant fleet's going to be a completely different kind of playstyle, I would imagine, for you don't have adaptive deflectors to kind of rely on, as it were, for the Tau merchant fleet. Instead, you only got like a single cruiser that has access to it. Everything else is going to be relying more on their other weaponry. They're going to be relying on their hit points. They're going to be relying on maybe being cheaper than the rest of the fleets that you're going to be going up against. So you will have numbers to a vague extent, as well as utilizing a good old Demiurge and Crew War Spear for the situations that are warranted. So this has been a very brief video going over all the changes that have been implemented into Armada 2, at least with what we could compare to Armada 1. I'm going to be looking into each of the individual new factions like the Drukhari, the Necrons, Tyranids especially. I'm going to be looking at all of them in their own separate videos, going over the kind of nuances and how their strategy may play as we get closer to release. Do keep in mind, of course, everything is likely to change, and from what I can remember from the July beta way back, there was a lot of changes in comparison to what it's like now. So I am pretty certain we're going to see some more changes, but I am pretty excited to get back into Battlefleet Gothic, and I'm excited for the days to come.